Hey, it's syndicated radio talk show host, author, singer Al Cole welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. I come from CBS Radio. My shows are nationally syndicated, and I've helped pave the way to treating women, guys too. Coming up, a guy with a great handle too. His name is Giridhar Jaded. And as you can hear when I'm saying it, if it sounds Indian to you, it is. Okay, so he's Indian, he lives in the States, and he's got a great poetry book that is out right now. It's called Let's Stir Some Thoughts. Yeah, let's stir some thoughts here. And we like that sort of thing on People of Distinction. It's all about thoughts. And, you know, the thoughts then become feelings. The feelings become spirit. And we can move mountains through the power of words, through the powers of our thoughts, through the powers of our feelings, and the powers of our spirituality. And, that makes a big difference when somebody actually puts their thoughts together, and a whole bunch of people too. And now we sift through other people's thoughts, we sift through ours, we get that sort of feedback. Now that's an important thing, and particularly when we do it in poetic ways. And see, poetry can say a lot in a few words. We know that. And this poetry book is going to say a lot to you by way of the author. And we're going to let him talk in another minute about his book, Let's Stir Some Thoughts. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and he was brought to us by Author Reputation Press. And if you have a book that you want to move, you got to move it through Author Reputation Press. They're one of the best in the business doing that. Go to authorreputationpress.com. Thank you for Giridhar for joining us today on People of Distinction with Al Cole. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Al. Thank you. I'm glad to be having a conversation with the alcoholic.
That
would change my perception forever from now onwards. I mean, it's like whenever we talk about alcoholic, it's usually a negative word, but from now on, it's going to be something positive.
You got it. Absolutely. We changed the negative to positive on People of Distinction. My CBS Radio listeners, as I mentioned in my intro, came up with that. And I'm so happy that they did. I didn't even think of it myself. But they started calling themselves alcoholics. And you got to run with that one. So thank you so much for that. Now, let's put the focus on your book here. Let's Stir Some Thoughts. It's a poetry book. What kind of thoughts did you want to stir in that, Giridhar?
Yeah, I mean, that question, it kind of throws me off a little because the number of poems in that book is 196, but I have actually included poetry on anything. I mean, it can range from anything from technology for a cause versus the simple acts of assurances that we keep getting when engaged in the act of fitness, of workout, or even in the media, in terms of how media can actually change the paradigms in terms of positive or negative, and in terms of looking at books. So there's a wide variety of topics that I have written on, but the basic concept is there's always more to it than what meets the eye. There's always something beneath the words if somebody is willing to look into it. And I have written, some of the topics would be on movies and how movies relate to life. And there could be something as simple as a blade of grass which is stuck on my shoe from a vacation 3 months back. How does that instill a thought into a memorable vacation and what I learned from that vacation, what I felt? And there could be poetry on labels on calendars as well. In terms of we look at the calendar and we see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday until Sunday. So what do those mean to us? Is a Monday of this week different, any different from a Monday of next week? Can we make it better? So it's more about how do we get involved in the act of deep thinking? Because on an average, a human speaks around 7,000 to 20,000 words a day.
Hmm.
But if we look at the number of thoughts that go through our mind, it could run into 100,000, and irrespective of the language that we think in. So how do we try to put some meaning into those thoughts, and then try to direct those thoughts in a way that would actually enhance our lifestyles?
Absolutely. And I like where you're coming from. Deep thoughts are always the best thoughts. I like this, getting deep right from the start. Now, tell us a little bit about your background. At this point, I think my listeners would like to know that because you sound like you're a very educated man. You come from India originally. India is known for very, very deep thinking with Buddhism and Zen Buddhism and everything else. Eastern thought. I've always been particularly inclined towards what is called Eastern philosophy. Have you taught? Are you a professor? Are you an engineer, a scientist? Give us a little bit about your background here.
Okay. Yeah. So I have lived around 26 years of my life in India, and then I currently work as a senior quality assurance manager in an IT firm. So it's totally different from what I pursue as my passion, which is writing poetry as well as writing other forms of books. So as part of my upbringing, when you talk about the upbringing in India, the core values that we usually see are centrally around family values. Education is, of course, very high priority because there's usually a lot of competition, so you have to put in that extra effort. So in terms of my education, I have actually completed engineering in industrial production, and then I did my Master's of Business Administration in Information Technology. And I started my career in an IT firm, and I'm still continuing with the same firm. It's been a journey of 14 years. And reading has, to me, been part of my existence right from the beginning. Ever since I could remember, I have been enrolled in books. And during my summer holidays back in India, when I was a child, I still remember being so influenced by a £1 million banknote by Mark Twain that I kept reading it all over again and again over an entire summer. I should have probably read it 30 to 40 times. So wow. Words have fascinated me from the beginning. I knew it deep within that words make more sense to me, and it was in English literature, and I have been fondly familiar with works from Ayn Rand. I started off with Nancy Drew, and then it actually moved on to John Grisham, Sidney Sheldon. So the fascination with books and words, it was evident right from the beginning. And the way it actually translated to me was I was always finding myself to be better with spellings as well as with rhymes. We didn't have the spelling bee competition at that point in time, but I do have memories of trying to spell the words in my local language using English. So that's how some of my family members tell me that I used to play around with words. And I believe the first poem that I had written was when I was 7 years old, and it was about life. And my dad read it, and then the first thing he said was, "Hey, you are too young to be writing about life at this point of time. Why don't you write about something on a lighter note?" But yeah, it's been a part of me, and then words actually make more sense to me as rhymes. If we look at the last year, I think it was in 2019 that I actually started getting into a lot of focused writing. I had to make time for it, make some changes in my lifestyle. But I have been able to pen around 1,300 plus poems in the last 1 year. So it's pretty evident that I love the feeling of diving into words and then seeing the outcome of it, and if the outcome has a positive message, if it has a way to change a perception, there's nothing like it.
Well, look at that. There is nothing like it, and we like that. I'm a poet as well, and now, give you the opportunity if you want to read any of your poems. You can certainly do that. Are you prepared to read anything from your book right now?
Yeah, I can do that, but I had penned a few lines about you, Al. I mean, if with your permission, I would actually be able to read that for you.
Go ahead. Yes, I'm honored. Please do.
Okay, here it goes. With a voice that sounds almost like meditation, and a mind that's curious, always about inspiration, ably aided by questions filled with a deeper introspection, Al Cole brings out the best through people of distinction. Be it a message of common good for humanity or about respect for women as a basic necessity, is the way some people make their contributions to the society. In bringing out the best in others, they find their sanity.
Well, look at that. Well, thank you so much for those honoring words. I appreciate that. And yeah, see, I've learned from the people around me ever since I was just a little kid, and I think I was born the way that I am. I've never really changed. I've grown. But essentially, I've always been the same sort of person, like you, looking for depth in life and learning that from a lot of the people around me, starting with my parents, wonderful, encouraging, supportive parents who helped me to develop even before I went to school. And after that, so many people that I've met with certain advantages that I had at school. And then after that, traveling all around this country as a musician, a singer, songwriter, and a speaker, everything, and meeting all different types of people who have offered tremendous wisdom. And a lot of what I do now is really a compilation of people who I've met, people who have influenced me in such tremendous ways. And it could be people that I just knew for maybe a 10-minute conversation. Maybe something stayed with me that way in the supreme unconscious, as I call it. And then it comes out with my voice, as you mentioned, right from the get-go, and my thought patterns, and really my love of humanity. So thank you so much for that that wonderful statement on Al Cole, Giridhar. I appreciate that very, very, very much.
Yeah. So one thing which I would like to talk about is, the kind of age we live in today. I mean, it's we are so much engulfed by technology. I mean, it's pretty much evident that nobody has time except for online streaming, or there's always the social media to look into. So the kind of attentions, what I call it as we all suffer from attention deficiency at this point of time. If you look at the kind of movies being made, the shorter the better. The kind of sports that used to go on for days are now being cut down into 1 or 2 days. And even the act of simple reading, the preference of reading a 300-page book has now pretty much changed into one-pager toast. And there are applications or media, or forms of media like Medium, wherein the readers are able to get to 1 or 2 minute reads. And so that's a particular trend wherein the attention span of people is actually reduced. So, and to try that, my poetry, even though it has a lot of deep thoughts, I try to put it into simplistic words, which most people can relate to, and then tie them down to the simple acts in life, like the simple act of having a cup of tea or a coffee in the morning. That can be something you will find in my poetry, and that's the way, because poetry can be definitely a way to instill some thoughts, make something out of it, and then be able to use it for a positive influence in our lives. And that actually ties down well with not having a lot of time to do the things that we want to do. So reading obviously is one of the things which everyone has to devote some time to. So why not poetry? And why not poetry that makes sense through the things that we actually deal with on a day-to-day basis? So that's what I have tried to do with my work of poetry in the 2 books, and I try to continue to do that in the couple of books that are upcoming as well.
Well, we love that. And hey, people, if you love it too, I want you to order this book, Let's Stir Some Thoughts, by our special spotlight interview guest here, Giridhar Jaded. And he's written some marvelous words of wisdom in this book, Let's Stir Some Thoughts. He comes from a very educational background, and he's just a wonderful, all-around positive person, and we love that on People of Distinction. With Al Cole, go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and order that book, Let's Stir Some Thoughts. And you are listening to Al Cole and People of Distinction right now, where we stir a lot of thoughts. In the final few minutes of this interview, and I'm very much enjoying it, you're saying some wonderful things, Giridhar. Let's cap it off with some possibility thinking that stems from your book. Now, your book is written, of course, in poetry form, and at any point, if you want to read one of your poems, feel free. Possibilities of life development on this planet, maybe over the next 10 years, 20 years, maybe starting next week if we're really lucky. Something about your book that might be able to help to develop technologically or maybe spiritually some of our future directions, some of the things that you think we need to accomplish into our future, the near future, and that Let's Stir Some Thoughts can really help out with. I know you've mentioned things periodically. Now let's stream it down to something particular that you would like to see in our next few years of development as a human family, that something in Let's Stir Some Thoughts can really help to elevate and really help to describe that direction. What would that be? Possibilities into our human future that maybe you've written something about that can really stir the way that we develop thoughts into the next 5 to 10 years. Is there anything along that line, Giridhar?
Yes, thank you for that question. I mean, it's a very thoughtful question. And then, what I could actually think of when it comes to that is we all know the importance of reading books. I mean, that has been said well enough. Every social media platform that we browse through, there's always a post that comes along that says Elon Musk used to read 2 books a day. And then that's pretty much spending like 10 hours a day on books. Why would somebody do that? And look at where he is today. And even in terms of capturing the knowledge from the past generations, there has been a lot of lessons learned from our ancestors that have been written, fortunately, for us to actually go back and reference to. So one interesting thought or a news article which actually happened in 2019 was there was a satellite that was launched to Moon. And what it carried, along with other things, was also, I believe it was 30 million pages of knowledge, of wisdom, actually being preserved on the moon for some of our future generations to refer back at some point in time. So those are like unquestionable lessons that have been learned, a great number of good books that have been written. All of that knowledge is on a DVD, and it's around 30 million pages of books on the moon. Now, when we talk about how do we influence or change and use technology in terms of the future generations, we are heading that way. I mean, we are making it very comfortable for an average reader to have access to information. I mean, reading need not always be on a paperback book, even though the hardcore readers or the traditional literature enthusiasts would actually want a feel of paper. But we are making it more comfortable in terms of having applications like Medium, or there are applications that can be installed on a phone. But there needs to be a certain way of actually making it a part of a lifestyle. I mean, we talk about sports bars, we talk about a lot of concert arenas and all, but why not set up a book bar? I mean, wherein you would actually walk into a restaurant or a bar and then be able to order a few of the top 10 best-selling books for that year, and then probably just browse through a few pages and then have a conversation starter, and then that could be around books, and as an outcome of that you could actually be starting to develop an interest in books.
I like that very, very much. Different ways to see life here, and the books, even at a bar. Why not, people? Let's use our minds a little bit more. And I'm going to cap off the show with a couple of cents of my own, underscoring the great sense that Giridhar has made throughout the show, and now particularly in possibility thinking. And I'm going to put it this way. One of the great possibilities of our human family development over the next 5 to 20 years, let's say, is our rediscovery of love. Now, you listen to people of distinction, you hear me talk about love a lot, because that is the final pathway of life. It's the initial pathway of life to people, and I say this a lot on my show. I'm going to say it right now because it's apropos with this interview. When we are born, we're all born babies. That's one of the big things that we have in common, among many other big things that we have in common. That baby has to look around and say, wow, I'm here. I made it. I'm actually alive. That's the greatest blessing in the world, people. Just to be alive at all. You've already got pay dirt out there. Now, that baby still lives within you. That innocence of love. The baby that looked around and said, wow, thank you for bringing me into this adventure, this beautiful experience called life. I love it. And I want to contribute to the love of life. And our institutions sometimes get in the way. And what is called, quote unquote, human nature, that I think is a superficiality. It's not necessarily our real nature. It's not the endemic nature of consciousness or spirituality necessarily. It's the way that institutions framework nature and manipulate our humanity to come up with, well, that's human nature. Hey, what are you going to do? Well, we can do a lot. We can do a lot, people, because you know that if I were to ask you, what are some of the top 5 things that you are involved in with life, the things that you love about life the most? They're all going to be things that do involve love. And they're probably not necessarily going to be the way that you're spending most of your time right now. Working, laboring. See, work should be a labor of love, not labor that is exhausting. Love, that's redevelopment. That is something that helps us to refresh ourselves. And so every once in a while, this is always my advice to people, take a little bit of alone time. Get to know yourself a little bit more and your love heritage by being that innocent baby again that cradled in the womb of life and said, wow, I'm here. I made it. I'm alive. Greatest blessing in the world, just to be alive at all. Revisit some of the love that you've given and the love that you've received. And as you do that, now you are energizing yourself again. You're saying, wow, life is worth it. Not only that, that beautiful energy now of love can be transmitted outwardly to positively affect the lives of other human beings. Now you're really serving. You're serving life itself and whatever masterful force or forces got us here in the first place. Now you're giving back to other people who have been born into that same special union of earthlyhood that you have, our human family, and you're giving back to that master force, that guiding force, whatever you want to call it, that wonderful creative force that got us here in the first place, you're giving back to that too. And if you really believe that, that is the main mission of our developmental consciousness into the future and into the past as well, because the past and the future and the present come together in your consciousness. You can help to make it happen, people. All you have to do is just spend a little bit of time where you know it's worth it to make it happen. And that's also what Giridhar talks about in his book, Let's Stir Some Thoughts. We have to stir thoughts, consciousness, spirituality, and love in our human family development, because we know that ultimately it's not worth anything without love. So let's get back on board with the rediscovery of love, and get back on board with the rediscovery of this book, Let's Stir Some Thoughts, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and also the fine publication that brought us here in the first place, the wonderful book publisher, Author Reputation Press. And you can run to their website, authorreputationpress.com. If you have a book that you want them to move, they can move it well for you. Thank you so much, Giridhar, for being my special guest on People of Distinction with Al Cole. And this has been a special time for me. Thank you for that honorary note, the poem that you read earlier. I appreciate it deeply.
I have a poem that I would like to read to wrap it up, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Yep. So it's about the simple act of watching a movie. The title of the poem is Together. So here it goes. How many times have we seen in a movie, fantasy, or even fiction, that the world as is stands divided until a threat to humanity has arrived, and out of the blue, everyone just unites, reinforcements, shelter, acts of kindness alike, to fight a threat together as mankind, and a few heroes out of the blue leave us in a bind. For in the end, in humanity standing together, we emerge from the trauma feeling stronger. But do we ever stop, reflect, and then ponder? If a sequel was made that went a step yonder, where the world reveled in that feeling of oneness and hung on to it, not again to isolation and loneliness? Or would there be another twist in the tale when prosperity is all places, none looking pale? Would humanity find newer ways to then divide, or to move on ahead as one, leaving petty anomalies to the side?
What a wonderful poem. And that is, so beautiful when you put it in terms of oneness and all of the great words that you strung together there that mean so much to the heart and soul. That is marvelous, marvelous stuff. We appreciate that very much on People of Distinction. And we wish you all the best with your book and your life direction. So thank you so much, Giridhar, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you, Al. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. Even when I actually listened to some of the other recordings, it was evident that this show is more about not the usual topic of discussion. It had to be more about deeper introspection and then deeper thoughts. So it's been a pleasure, and I'll definitely be looking forward to listen to more of your shows in future.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.